Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're back. We know you've missed us so much. Today, we are starting the New Moon section of the Glittery Musing podcast, aka season 2.
Yeah. And it's so much easier to follow the reading schedule since we don't have to read 2 books.
It's just chapters, the preface, and then chapters 1 through 5 this week. Easy peasy. And now, if you're watching us on YouTube, you may be thinking, hey, there's an extra person on this video. This is my brother / Amy's cousin, because me and Amy are related. Jacob! Yay!
Hello.
Okay, so if you are new to the podcast, you wouldn't know, Jacob is joining us for New Moon specifically. He has never read Twilight or any of the other books. He has not watched the films. He's going in completely blind to New Moon, aka Book 2. Now, why are we doing this? You may wonder. There are a plethora of reasons, but we often say that we feel this podcast is deeply unserious and we take it deeply seriously. So, in part for funsies and to lean a little more into the unseriousness, because we've been pretty serious thus far.
I will say, if I may.
Yeah.
I think an interesting
or
sibling dynamic is coming out already. Callie gave me a look for interrupting her.
If you thought the cousin dynamics between me and Amy were good, just wait till the sibling dynamics of me and Jake come out. No, Jacob, you've already taken the spotlight. Feel free.
What? Okay, no, because I thought a more profound thing also, that in addition to this being very goofy, which it is I think it's interesting that when you read long book series, often like you'll be like 7 books in and they'll still do the like introduction, like, Harry Potter book 5. They're like, in this world there's magic and I go to this place called Hogwarts, and I'm always like, who is this for? Like, no one just jumps into this book and starts reading. So I'm like, I've always genuinely been very interested, because it's like writers seem to write for that, but I don't know anyone who reads books like that. Just like, oh, I just found, Lord of the Rings, the 3rd book.
I did notice that while reading New Moon, because I was thinking how Jacob's seeing it from his perspective, and I'm like, oh, they explain some of the stuff, but there's definitely some stuff that they have left out. But
yeah. Yes, the second part of my intro to Jacob's segment, which was rudely interrupted, is that one of Jacob's favorite tropes in literature is when they drop you in, when the book starts out and they drop you in and you have no idea what's happening and you're trying to figure out the context. So, me and Amy talked a lot about what genre Twilight fell into in season 1. And so to lean into the fact that we actually think Twilight is a mystery novel, we're bringing in Jake with Max Mystery.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
So, yeah. Jake has not also listened to any of the podcast, because obviously then he would know what was happening in the books. So he's not aware that we've had in-depth discussions about the tropes. Not the tropes, the genre. Also the tropes.
I'm also curious because I don't know if New Moon is particularly a mystery. I don't quite remember, but I have a feeling probably.
I don't think it is, but also
it does. It opens with the future of the book, I assume. Like the prologue is like, oh, something's happening. That's been kind of.
Yeah. All right. So without further ado, Jake, having read the first 5 chapters, what do you think happened in Twilight?
All right. Here is my my what I've gathered. So you got Bella, main character. She has 2 parents. which she for some reason refers to often by their first names, and I don't really understand why. Anyways, she's referred to both of them by mom and dad at some point. But anyways, so I think she was living with her mom in Florida, I think, and then moved to. I'm getting some faces already. Maybe her mom.
I don't know if I should react or not.
I guess we didn't talk about, are we confirming or denying any of the things that Jacob's gonna say? Or
I think it's more fun if in like halfway through the book I suddenly realize I've been wrong the whole time on something. So maybe just don't.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know, unless it's like really incidental.
I'm fine with that.
But anyways,
I will not verbally react.
So she certainly
she moved a lot with her face.
She moved to Washington to live with Charlie, her dad. Charlie seems like a sad guy, because everyone like at every situation is like, Bella, you really got to support Charlie. Like your dad, you got to be there for him. She's like, I'd kill myself, but my dad would be sad. Like it comes up often that Charlie is everyone likes him and wants to be supportive of him.
Charlie's one of my favorite characters, by the way. Just thought that was important information.
But yes, but she's mentioned a lot of stuff like, oh, it's the first birthday with Charlie and stuff. So like she's not super familiar with living with him. So I don't know. There's some familial situation I feel like I'm not getting quite right, of like maybe they've been separated the whole time or there's something like that. But I think her mom has remarried in like Jacksonville or something they've mentioned. Anyways, so that went down. She moves to this small town, Washington. Forks, right? Yes, Forks, Washington. They've mentioned her human friends, so I would assume the beginning of the book is about that. Like Mike, the guy who likes her, who basically in this book, Mike has only been referenced of her being like, Mike, he kind of looks like Edward, but he'll never be close. And I'm like, dude, what's the shade on Mike? Like he's done nothing wrong.
There's shade on Mike, okay?
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. So she there's that. Towards the end, she mentioned like, oh, I'm on the dock and I see some guys at a bar and I'm getting like deja vu. And so I assume that was like an inciting moment in the first book, that there was some situation. Callie hides her face. Which I mean, like guys on bar feels like that's how you introduce your supernatural love interest, is like, oh, she's been saved or something. I don't know. I imagine that was important. Hold on. Let me pull up my notes for names. I know by the end of the story, so she's met all the Cullens. There's another group of vampires who are not the Cullens, led by or involved by James. Who my note is bad vampire James has vampire gang. So he takes her to like New Mexico or something. They went to some secondary location where he like drained a bunch of her blood, and Edward was really pissed. And that's kind of what and he like kidnapped her mom, I guess, or something. But then there's some line like there was some weird line of like being like, oh, I was put in terrible danger, or so we thought. And then it just moves on. I'm like, well, what happened? Anyways. So there was, I feel like I'm a bit vague on that, but it's already happened. I imagine that was like the climax of the first book. The Cullens, it seems like some of the Cullens don't like Bella, or at least there's the like older, there's like 5 siblings, quote unquote, I think. There's the friend she likes, the other girl. There's Edward. Alice, yes, she's in the prologue of, she's like, Alice is gonna die, and I'm like, who's Alice? But anyways, yes, so there's her, there's Edward, there's the old so one of the older brothers, when he is first brought up because Bella says the older not Charlie. Anyways, his name, Emmett. Yes, she first brings him up as Emmett, and the other scary siblings have graduated. And I'm like, what does that mean? But then she meets him and he's like, oh, he's smiling like always. And I'm like, okay. So I don't really know his vibe, if he's like friend or enemy. And then there's the older sister who seems to never like her, and then the other brother who tries to kill her in this one, who I imagine was not at school with them if he freaks out by seeing a paper cut. Or at least that would be.
You would think, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
you would think.
You'd think.
Like
we already discussed this in a previous
up.
episode, but that's Jasper and Rosalie, the older sister.
Yes. Yeah. So my assumption is that you get she moves to Washington, Forks. We gradually meet the vampire family. There's some internal dynamics of like, ooh, that whole stuff, and then there's the bad vampire shows up. We get big confrontation, and that's the whole book. Is my assumption. It seems like some time has passed since that, but not much, because she says it's her first birthday with Charlie. So this all has happened within a year. Also, because when she talks about Jacob, she says, it's been 8 months since I've seen you. So I don't know if he was a character in the first book or if they're adding him now.
Did it say 8 months specifically?
I think so. I believe that's what I wrote down, at least. And there was a 4-month time skip within these chapters also.
Okay.
That's after. Yeah, that's when she's with the motorcycles. Yeah.
Yes. The car has been prominently featured. So if the car getting acquired was a main part of the first book, it was got from his dad, I guess. So maybe he would have shown up at that point. But yes. So that is my understanding of the first book. I feel like I know what's going on. I'm like, maybe I am confused.
We didn't even have to friggin' read. We just read 1,600 pages for nothing.
I'm there. Here is okay. I have two things I think that are interesting. One, Edward's dad has the coolest introduction ever. So here's my introduction with Edward's dad. So he's not mentioned. And then also the whole opening with the Romeo and Juliet quote, like these violent delights of violent ends. I'm like, oh, that's a fun setting the stage. So then they're just hanging out watching Romeo and Juliet, and then Edward does his Romeo has it easy. I think it's really hard to kill myself. And it's like, all right, Edward, this is my second interaction I've had with you. Elaborate on that. Anyways, but then he's like, oh yeah, when I don't know how to pronounce his dad's name. It's like Carlisle. But anyway, so he's like, oh yeah, when Carlisle first turned and wanted to kill himself, it was really hard. I'm like, ooh, who's this Carlisle guy? That's interesting. I don't know, sounds like a complicated character. And then and then we don't hear about him, and then we go to their house, and then we get the portraits, and they're like, they talk about the ancient Italy vampire royalty, and they're like, oh yeah, Carlisle was hanging out with them. I'm like, oh, he's got some connections. And then we interact with him a little bit at the party, but the whole he reacts to he's the only one who doesn't freak out about Bella's blood. And I don't know he's a surgeon yet until after I find out he's been a surgeon. That's such a cool intrigue kind of thing of everyone's freaking out, and then he's just really calmly analyzing the situation. I'm like, this is such a cool what's going on with this guy? And it's a very interesting build up to him as a character, and then his only conversation is do vampires have souls, and what's can we redeem ourselves in the world? I'm like, this guy's great. I want more of this guy. So he's very cool.
He's solid. I also just realized that Amy's two love interests in Twilight are the dads.
I wouldn't call them my love interests, but
I mean,
my favorite characters.
When all of the actual love interests are children, it's maybe maybe okay.
I mean, a lot of them are. They're all hundreds.
90s.
I certainly didn't know Edward was 17 biologically and have been distressed by that. There's been a number of lines where he's Bella's Edward gets what he wants because all the women administrators at school just kind of do what he wants. I'm like, is he vampire seducing them as a child?
I literally highlighted that line and said something about this is really creepy without context, and it's still creepy when you have context.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I expect going through this book. So basically, I mean, just to clarify, the things I knew going into this is I knew that Edward is a vampire. I knew Edward versus Jacob is a thing because that you didn't have to read the books to get that. So I know Jacob's a vampire. I know Jacob's a werewolf. Edward's a vampire. I know at the very end of this, Bella becomes a vampire and has a kid with Edward. So like I know where it ends for better or worse.
Spoilers, everyone.
Oh my God. Are people watching this with like their first watch? Their first read of the...
Maybe.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. We can bleep that out. No, this is just you're getting the vampire experience of like reading the minds. Which that has not been very relevant so far. That feels like they just kind of casually dropped that.
I was going to ask you what you thought about the different vampire powers that have been put out there and what you think that has been put out there. Because I don't even recall for sure which ones happen.
Yeah, so I will also note they explicitly said 2 of them. Yeah. One is heavily implied, but all of the Cullens have powers. So I'm curious if you just want to throw it out, Jake. What do you think?
Okay,
Let's start
now
with
the way you said that makes me sound like they have different powers, which is not a thing I had considered. But anyways, so here's my understanding.
Wow, I didn't think that either. But yeah. Well, that a little bit.
So my understanding is they all sunlight glimmer. So I mean that's not really a power, but like that.
Yeah, I'm talking about their special like extra power.
Sure. Yeah. I mean so.
Standard vampire lore in the Twilight universe.
They can all read minds, it seems, because they like emphasize that like Edward can't do that to Bella, and then there's the whole thing. I forget her name again. The Alice Kent does it. She's like, "Oh, what'd you think of Charlie's gift?" So that's the thing they can do. They've mentioned like Alice is like amazing at predicting the stock market, so I wonder if she can like see the future or if she's just supposed to be smart.
I just love the idea of her power just being the stock market. I know that's not what you said.
Only for stocks.
My power is money. So they've mentioned that. I mean, it seems like they're all like, you know, super strength, super speed kind of things to some degree. That like they haven't really been fighting thus far, but I don't know.
Carlisle, do you have any inkling on Carlisle's special ability?
No, I've none inclination that he's got anything different of him, but now I do. So I'm watching. I'll keep an eye on him if he shows up again in the book. Presumably he will.
All of the vampires have special powers, but some of them are more significant than others.
Some of them get lame powers. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
I have here's a
Esme.
And Rosalie.
Yeah, true.
I have a vague suspicion, which is not really based on anything, that so we know Bella's different because she like doesn't have her mind read. They really are hard emphasizing she's super clumsy, and I don't know if that's like we're trying to make her relatable to the teenage girls who are reading this, or Kylie, this was not meant to be targeting you.
Rude.
Or if it's like the like, you know, like, oh, we're setting up to she has something weird with her body that like, and then, you know, in end of book 2, book 3, they're gonna be like, this is why this has always been going on. Like, I don't know. So that just because they bring it up like every chapter, it's mentioned that she's like, or just the whole like she's been like lacerated all over, and she comes home, her dad sees it, and he's like, that again. It's just like, what? Like, you have to be very clumsy. Anyways, so I'm curious about if she's got something going on. So okay, I suspect going through this book, I will be like, compared to a normal reader, disproportionately anti-Edward, because I have no context for the relationship. Like, I jump into the relationship. My only experiences with Edward were him being like, hey, we're going to celebrate your birthday. And then talking about like, I was going to kill myself when you were in danger. And then like him, like, so basically all I know about Edward is that he likes Bella. He doesn't like being a vampire, and he's hot. Like that is the information I have about him. And then
He's oh no, you already said he's a vampire. Done. He can read minds. There you go.
There you go. But and just the whole like, I'm gonna leave because this is best for you. And then like she has a mental breakdown for like in the moment, like goes unconscious in the woods. And I'm like, hey, you've like spent maybe 100 years interfacing with high school girls. You would think you would know this was a bad way to do this.
I also have to say, I definitely am not Team Edward, as we have made clear, but these particular chapters are especially unflattering for him.
Yeah. So this is my only information of Edward. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
I've been Team Edward through and through. My first red flag was the end of the book, and now I hate him. But I'm in a bad mood today, so.
Yeah. I did find it very funny. Because there's the like scene like after her birthday party where she walks into her house and like Edward's there watching like football with her dad, and she's like, he's watching football. Oh no, everything's going to hell. And she just like freaks out so much. And I'm like, I guess it's because he's like not like paying her as much attention as he normally does. And like over time, that's like what's going on. But just in that moment, it was very like, he's watching sports. He's a normie. No, like, I don't know. It was just, I found that very funny.
That was funny. I do have one question that I'm curious. Yeah. Do you have any insight to what happened to the Cullens? Like where they went or what's going on?
Not really. I mean, so Edward mentions the other vampire family briefly, which they kind of explain them in a way that makes it seem like they weren't a big component of the first book, because they're like, oh, one of James's friend visit there also. So maybe that. I mean, they've mentioned Italy like a little bit also, but no, not really.
Okay.
Do you mean one of Jasper's friends?
No, James is the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
Bad vampire?
Laurent. They said it in the book that Laurent went to cousins.
Yeah.
Yes, but they said Jasper probably went to this other vampire family, and one of James's people had done that also in the first book. But also there was that scene where maybe Edward was talking to Bella after he left, and she was all like, I'm crazy, I'm imagining his voice. But I'm like, this is a fantasy novel. I feel like it's not a hard assumption to assume something like actually is going on. So that's a whole twist, as if she's doing like a fling with Jacob throughout the book, and Edward's like phantom watching her life. Like, that's a weird dynamic if that's where we're going. Yeah.
Do you have any predictions of what you think is going to happen going forward?
So literally, as soon as Bella blacks out, I have a note. Like, literally, my notes go, Bella blacked out in the wood. Yeah, Edward, a clean break was really the right move here. And then just space. Oh shit, is this the setup for the love triangle? So like, obviously, I even like not knowing, I think that there's like a love triangle coming. I feel like that's pretty apparent. The werewolves or like the people at the reservation seem like very anti-vampire, so like that seems like a like contentious point. Yeah, I don't know.
You are also assuming that the people at the reservation know they're vampires?
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, I don't know, because they have mentioned a couple times that like the Jacob's dad, who's friends with Bella's dad, like was like, hey, don't hang out with the Cullens. And then when all the Cullens left, they threw a big party that the Cullens left. So I assume there's some level of knowledge of the vampire nest, or they're just like really racist towards
white
British people. Yeah, I don't know. Like, oh, I am really curious, like more about which I don't know if I'm going to get this because this feels like a book one thing, but like just the vampire, like the Cullen family dynamics, because it seems like Edward was the first like person he turned from the way he described that. But like he's like, is he married to what's her name, Esme? Esme. Like they're at least presented as the like as a married couple, but I don't know if that like obviously they're not like literally parents of the other one. So I'm curious that whole dynamic, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna get that. Yeah. So I don't know. I would like Bella to have a emotional arc because she's real. I'm having a hard time empathizing with just the extreme bleak. The world is over, which is partially my personality, and again, I think partially the like. It's hard when you jump in and you have like 2 chapters of a person's normal life, and then they're like everything's ruined, to a relationship that like you don't have context for ending.
I did make a note at one point that I said that I was curious to see what your reaction was because Bella can be pretty dramatic. So
it's a lot. Yeah. It's she is, but also like her friends are like her human friends are terrible also. Like, cause she's like, hey, do you want to like hang out? It's been a while. And like, what? With me? Like it's just I'm like, man, this is not
Jessica's the worst.
Yeah.
We don't like Jessica.
Not ideal. I don't know. That's kind of, I'm curious if how much of like vampire seduction stuff we're doing, because I mean that would explain her like reactions toward Edward if there's like a kind of like supernatural stuff with that. I'm really curious like Edward's perspective on things, because like it feels like he's decided like, this is bad for you. And I mean, believe it or not, there's a weird power dynamic here of the 18-year-old and the family of vampires in like basically every way of like, hey, he's rich and 5 times your age and like can kill you very easily. Like in every way, there's a power dynamic. And she's like, please, I love this power dynamic. And he's like, I don't know about that. So like, like I'm curious, like his level of decision making, because it's very different from like a high school relationship of like, we've been dating a year, your parents are moving, that's sad, but it feels more like I assume Edward was involved in the decision of moving away. So I don't know. That's interesting to me.
You mentioned earlier about the timeline and how long do you think Bella has been there, and how long? Well, I guess
you said earlier under a year.
I think under a year, yes. Although it is weird because I guess it seems like she's known like Jacob and that family for a lot longer. So I don't know if it was like she lived, but it doesn't seem like she's lived in the town for a long time, just based on her relationships to people. So I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I think under a year she's been in in the town.
Okay, I think we should end it there today, Jake. For
one more question that I just want to ask is if there's any
5 minutes.
Okay, it's a short question. It's just if there's any characters that you think are your favorite or least favorite so far.
Definitely Edward's dad is my favorite. Least favorite, I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like Edward has pulled some dick moves and like has basically no personality thus far, but he could be interesting. Like his dad was like, he has a heart of gold. And I'm like, that is the only description of his character, as opposed to Bella, who's dating him, has only described his appearance. So Bella's annoying me, but like as the protagonist, I'm like fairly confident I'll like her more. I don't know. I think she could have an arc that I'll like in this. I guess Jessica, she doesn't seem, she's just annoying. I don't know. Like all the vampires, I'm like, I don't know, you have a reason to be like in conflict here. She's just like a high school girl I don't like. Which feels like more real, so that feels worse. But yeah. So I think that's where I'm at with that.
Okay.
Phenomenal. Okay, next week we'll do the additional chapters, and then I also want to hear, I feel like if we build some like what lore are you believing, so next week let's also chat about what you think, what vampire cliches are present in Twilight versus which ones are not, because that's also a big theme. So yeah. All right. Thanks for coming on, Jake.
Thanks for having me. This has been I've been really enjoying this far. So
That's good, because I've hated it so far. Let's get into it. All right. Bye, Jake.
Bye.
Well, that was fun to listen to what his thoughts were. And some were pretty on spot, and then others were not so much.
Yeah, for sure. It was hard for me not to jump in. And hence, if you're watching on YouTube, you will have noticed I literally covered my face a few times to not give it away.
I mean, there was something he said, and I was just like nodding along, like, okay, and you were like,
yeah, I know.
And interesting that he thought that they all could read minds. I could see that since Alice can, you know, so
yeah, it makes sense. I think that was the moment where I was like,
that might have been it. Yeah, that might have been it. Also interesting, he doesn't know for sure if James is dead, I don't think, based off of what he said.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. No, he definitely does not. Oh, man. All right, let me pull up my notes. I got a new notes app, guys, so I don't have to scroll. I mean, like a new note on the notes app. So I'm not scrolling through all the Twilight ones.
Yeah. I don't have to go between two books where my notes are, so it should be better for both.
Phenomenal. Okay, do we want to jump in maybe like what makes more sense? Do you want to jump in with what Jake just talked about and anything we want to chat about with that, or should we just jump in to our notes?
Maybe we jump into with the stuff with Jacob just so it's like fresh in our mind, and then if more comes up later that we remember to talk about, we do that. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know if you have thoughts. I have a couple things, but I've already mentioned a couple of them also. So
yeah, feel free to bring them up. Feel free to bring them
up. Well, one of them was talking about the love triangle and how he seems to think something is actually going to happen with Jacob. And I'm like, that seems to be a thing that was like played up particularly for the movies. And I actually had notes on that this week, comparing the books to the movies and how they did that. So totally. I'm not surprised by that, but obviously it doesn't really happen.
The love triangle is between Kristen Stewart, R. and Taylor Lautner. It is not between Edward, Jacob, and Bella.
Yeah, but it's not even really between those actors because Bella.
Yeah, no.
Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson dated, so.
Yeah, during this time, which was part of the psychoness of it all, that they actually got together. So again, similar to the books, they were doing the real life, more true book version.
I guess I don't have a lot other notes on what Jacob said, other than I thought it was funny that he noticed how clumsy Bella was and how they mentioned that all the time, because I'm like, I don't even notice that anymore. But yeah, I guess they did.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I was pretty impressed. He picked up on pretty much all the plot. Like, definitely not the nuances and like the emotional stakes or like the characters, but we kind of knew he wouldn't, you know. But yeah, pretty much all the plot he's pretty on point with. So yeah. Anyways, that's impressive. Or not, depending on your views on that writing style, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, should we jump in to my anger?
Sure. I did take note of the quote that they had before the preface, even about, because you know they did that with the last one with a Bible passage, and now it is a Romeo and Juliet, which clearly we get more of Romeo and Juliet as we go on. So
yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and because we like had so many like biblical references in the last one, I'm curious if we're going to get a lot of like Shakespeare references. Obviously there was others, you know, we had a lot of like Hades, Persephone references also, but that kind of fit with Midnight Sun and the pomegranate, you know? So I almost wonder if each like book kind of has like a thing they reference. So I'm curious about that. The preface was very intense.
Yeah.
Once again, the last Twilight's preface was also intense, but this one was like worse. I thought.
I did find it interesting that both the prefaces for both of the books start with Bella saving someone's life or trying to save someone's life.
Oh, that's true.
The first one talks about the incident with James and thinking that she's going to save her mom's life, and then
yeah,
I mean, it doesn't say who it is, but we know who it is. But
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you know that it's her saving her mom's life in the preference a lot of time. She knows she's going to die.
She's going to die for someone she loves, is I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I actually remember the scene that they are depicting in the preface, unlike last time where I was just guessing.
Yeah. I figured you'd remember this one because
I can see the movie scene crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
Robe.
I know, and that was part of the reason that I thought it would be better. I thought it'd be better if Jacob didn't watch the movies because the movies give a lot of stuff away. And also in the movies they talked about Victoria, which we get no context for in the books.
Totally.
And stuff like that. So
yeah. So everyone knows Jake is not watching the movie; he's just reading the book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, here's the thing. We all know we ended season 1 with me being like, I don't even want to keep reading. I'm so mad at Edward. This sucks. And the reason, obviously, we talk about more in that episode. You can go re-listen to all my thoughts. But mostly it's just like, it just sucks. Like, this is such a painful breakup thing. Jake being like, she's dramatic. I'm like, I literally have been Bella. Like, I have been in this like breakup coma and I don't want to be in this space. I'm mad at Edward. He's so shitty how he ends this, how he leaves. And I'm just mad. I'm just so mad at him. And you know what? This chunk of reading was me being madder at him, which we're not surprised, but I just was pissed. Half my notes are just me being pissed. I just was so upset this whole book. I was like, I don't want to read this. I'm over it. You suck. This sucks. Blah. Which again, that maybe is just a sign of great writing. I'm feeling the emotion, but I am hopeful that actually it's not going to be as bad as I thought. Obviously she's still going to be depressed, but I'm like, okay, I feel like we've gotten through maybe the worst of it in this section.
Those 4 chapters where it was just the month for the title and no context. And I do have to say, I just want to make it clear, because I am sympathetic as to what Bella is going through. And where I talked about earlier about Bella being dramatic, what I said with Jacob, that was right at the beginning when she's talking about her worst nightmare being older. And I was just that's pretty dramatic. I think there are definitely some things that are very valid and not as dramatic. I mean, that's still but and then
I mean, I know I'm dramatic, so I also you can be dramatic.
Yeah. I also remembered a lot of what happened and how things went with Edward leaving and stuff. So it's not as surprising to me. I'm sure if I was reading it without context, I would be more pissed off. And there is a particular point in this reading that I got really pissed off. So I'll talk about it when we get there. But
yeah. Anyways, yeah. So that was my emotional state for basically this whole time. But I did end being like, okay, I think we're through the worst of it. I'm not going to spend the next 3 weeks. I think I thought 75% of the book was going to be this vibe. And I knew Edward left early, but I thought we were just going to be really stuck in depression, which I think we still might be, but I'm hopeful we're going to move into more dynamics with Jacob earlier than I thought. So
I truly don't remember what happens between here and going to Italy. I really don't remember most of that chunk. And I feel that is 2/3 of the book, probably. So
yeah, I know she like befriends, like she starts hanging out with the tribe boys, and obviously they're werewolves. So yeah,
obviously that happens. That's one thing I do remember.
But that's it. Otherwise I'm the same boat. Like I can picture the movie scene of like the ending, which is ironic because I have like watched the movie as many times as I've read the book. Once
I feel like it's all the red cape. It's a very moment.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, like I reenacted it earlier. If you're listening to the podcast, you're really missing out this episode. I'm covering my face, pretending to be swooped with like a hood and swaying through the crowds of red.
There was a lot of facial expressions, I think, from both of us going on when we were talking to Jacob. So
yeah, true. This is a good one to
watch.
Whatever. Yeah, to watch. And then you can be like, oh my gosh, you guys all have the same nose. And we'll say, we know, we're related.
I also think we didn't really say explicitly on the podcast till this episode that we're related. So there's that. I could be wrong. But I don't think so.
Maybe I thought in the first one we did. Oh, well. Yeah, we are best friends and cousins. Cute. If you didn't know, now you do. Welcome to season 2. Oh, okay.
Chapter 1?
We're
this far in and we're getting to chapter 1.
Whoopsies. All right. Chapter
Okay, we don't have
1.
2 books this time. So
yeah, I do. Looking through my notes, I was like, I feel like they're going to be shorter episodes, but who knows? Maybe I'll be dramatically wrong once again. Okay, I did think it was interesting. This is the first like real overt look at like the disparity between like Edward being immortal and Bella staying mortal in like this dream that Bella has of her being really old and Edward coming up to her still looking like a 17-year-old, you know? Because it's obviously been a theme, but more so from Edward's POV in Midnight Sun. And as a positive, like this is the first time they've really like dove into it, you know?
Yeah.
In like a negative way.
Yeah.
Anyways. So, yeah, which again makes sense because Bella obviously wants to become a vampire and Edward doesn't want her to. So it makes sense. Those are their perspectives. Yeah, my next note is they've been dating 6 months, ? I cannot with this timeline. Like, I cannot deal.
Yeah, I know. One of my first notes is talking about, she says how it's the happiest summer anyone had ever had. And I'm like, this man knew he was going to break up with you before summer started. And he's still leading you on. Like,
that's why I'm pissed. I'm so mad at him. Also, let's just be clear that this 5 chapters we read officially a longer timeline than the entire book of Twilight. Just for context.
That's accurate, isn't it? I did not think about that. Yeah, I mean, really, it's 4 months that have no notes with them. That really,
yeah, that does.
That's
that
crazy.
does. Yeah,
I didn't put it in context, man. Wow. And then it blew my mind when Jacob said about, it's so confusing, Jacob said about Jacob being that she hadn't seen him in 8 months. And I think I didn't realize that because in the movies it's not as long, but I guess it has been 8 months since she had seen him because last time was prom. So
yeah. Okay. So Bella's birthday. Want to jump in?
Yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah. Bella has her birthday. She wakes up from this nightmare where she is super old. Edward is young. And it is her 18th birthday, which she is absolutely dreading because it means she's officially older than Edward. And it's like the start. It's the first like year that she's going to pass him. I do think it's really fair in this section that she says, I wouldn't be that upset if I knew Edward was going to cave in a couple years. You know, like if I was permanently stuck at like 25 and him at 17, like it's not a big deal, but it's like the start of this like separation that's going to happen for forever, I think is like super fair that she's kind of dramatic about it.
That makes her whole concern much more valid, because when you're like, if it's just like, oh, you're just going to be older than him by like, at this point, a few months. But when you have like the context of her dream, it's like, yeah, that's crazy. Like, and for him to not at this point be ever willing to change her, that's valid.
So. Yeah, for sure. And then because of this, she doesn't want anyone to celebrate her birthday, which everyone ignores, basically, particularly Alice, though love Alice for it. And the Cullens go all out because they have not been able to actually celebrate somebody's like actual birthday, actually aging since 1935. And since I'm like, Twilight came out in 2005. When did New Moon come out? Anyways, whatever. This is 6 months later. So, yeah. Regardless, it's been a long freaking time. And Alice goes all out. She goes all out in the decorations, the candles, the description. I was like, this sounds like a classy quinceañera to me. That was the vibe I was getting. With all the pink and the crystal and like all the candles.
Yeah. I see it.
That's that was the vibe I imagined, which is not particularly what I would be looking for as a moody teen in Northern Washington, but specifically 18. But whatever, it was cute, very, very glamorous.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I had a note, I think it happened before that, but they also talk about it later, about Edward talking about the Volturi, and that's the first that Bella is aware of the Volturi, which I didn't fully realize. She had heard about the members and stuff, but didn't know it was the Volturi. And he says something about how you don't irritate the Volturi unless you want to die, or whatever it is we do. And I was like, oh, they don't know what happens. Like, do they really die? Like, you know, and I mean, obviously people don't definitely know that answer either, but like, yeah, I just, something I hadn't thought about. So,
yeah, I did think that was really interesting. I mean, Jacob, my brother, brought it up. Maybe we just call him Jake on the podcast from here on out.
Easy.
So yeah, he brought up Carlisle talking about religion, and I did think that section was super interesting. That's jumping ahead a little bit. I think we cover that in chapter 2, but yeah, so we'll talk about that more for sure, because I do think the debate that they have and all of them having different opinions on what happens like when they die, or kind of like their like soul's spiritual journey, you know, I think that's kind of interesting. So moving right along, they get to the party. Things are going good. Very cutesy. Everyone's happy. Everybody's there also.
We also learned that they did in fact graduate, and that they are no longer at the high school, which is different from the movies, because we see Jasper at the high school in the movies. So
I was like, it's sad. I kind of like that. Like, I want him to be at the high school. Clearly he shouldn't be. But it's like sad for Alice.
Yeah, I had thoughts about that, because I'm like, so is Jasper just like hanging out at home 24/7? Because obviously he's not going to go somewhere because he wants to be with Alice, you know, because Emmett and Rosalie are in Africa apparently. But like, also I'm wondering if it leads to, you know, him with the whole paper cut thing, if that's partially because he's not around humans much anymore, you know?
Yeah, I do wonder. So in the book, they talk about kind of the cover that Emmett and Rosalie both say they're going to Dartmouth, but they're actually in Africa. They don't say what Jasper's doing. But it is like we're led to believe he graduated. So, I'm curious, because it's not like he's at like a state college in Forks or something, you know, so then he like can't be seen. I don't know, just seems weird.
Yeah,
who knows? Clearly not the detail that Stephenie was focused on there. But yeah, so then Bella gets a paper cut while opening a gift, and that makes her have one drop of blood. Edward leaps on top of her. Jasper leaps over also. Again, that was a good moment to be on video. My gestures are outstanding today. Leap, leap, leap. So yeah, Jasper like lunges for her. Now, tell me your thoughts on this, Amy, because we kind of talked about it previously, and we previously have rationalized that Jasper didn't lose his shit in the ballet studio because he was in like warrior war mentality, and that's we kind of like made the inference maybe that's part of his powers. So this would fall into like he's caught off guard, he's in like a happy cheery mood, he's not like feeding off like danger doom. Do you feel like that tracks with what we have rationalized for Jasper? Do you feel like this is out of character, doesn't make sense? Yeah, tell me your thoughts.
Yeah. I know, I have conflicting thoughts because I think that's like solid reasoning to think that it's partially because, you know, when he was at the ballet studio, he like knew what he was getting into and whatnot.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that. But this was a single drop of blood compared to her almost bleeding to death. And it's just hard to imagine that it's that good, especially since his powers like are like mood control and stuff already. So I don't know.
Yeah. I just really struggle to believe that there's not been one single drop of blood he hasn't been exposed to at a high school where he's been in like sure. No one got a nosebleed in class. No one got a paper cut in class. Like, because it's not like with Edward where he has this like pull to her blood specifically. Like,
yeah,
we're led to believe that's not true for Jasper. So yeah, I don't know. This felt a little like it doesn't really line up.
I had that thought too. And then also what you were talking about with how we thought that maybe it was because he was like happy and caught off guard and whatever, but you can tell that he's still like putting a distance between them.
That's true. He's still on edge. Yeah,
so
that's true.
That makes it even less believable to me. So I don't know about that, but
yeah. You know, I hate
Edward's perspective of this book. We probably would have a answer as to why it happened. Plot hole would be covered.
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? Yeah, so this happens, and then we jump into chapter 2 immediately. First, I have a bunch of notes being like, this is why Edward's gonna leave. I'm so mad at him, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but then we'll skip all that. I mean, I just said it, so I guess we didn't skip it. But my next question, next plot hole, sorry, everyone. Why did Alice not see this happening?
Yep, that's a question I had.
Because we do know she often is looking at the future when Bella is involved. She's often looking at the future around Jasper. Like,
yeah, and it's not like at this moment she's distracted or anything. Like, her attention is on Bella. So
yeah, it just doesn't like that. It wouldn't have even been a possibility. It just seems unlikely because, again, sometimes she doesn't see it when it's been like a really big like turn of what the person does. But again, like, this is not a like huge turn of scene. She's been insisting Bella opens presents for a while. She's been planning for a while, you know? So
and she's even been specifically looking at Bella's reactions to opening presents. So
yeah,
not quite she's distracted and not able to
it's a plot hole for me. So that's a bummer. You guys know I hate to point out the plot hole. I don't like to ruin the story. And like Stephenie Meyers is a published author, whether she has plot holes or not. So power to her. But I was bummed. I was bummed that there felt like such major plot holes to be the catalyst for basically the whole plot of this book. Sucks.
Yeah.
Bummer.
I also just find it insane, and I mean, we'll kind of get more into this, I don't know, that this is the catalyst for them to leave, and it's like, she almost died like a couple months ago, and you were all like, it'll be fine. And, well, it's Edward, but and now this. And this is like, I really want to have Edward's perspective on this, because I just don't know how everyone would get on board with what they decided to do. Or I don't think everyone was on board completely, but
no, here's my theory on this. So we're jumping ahead a little bit, but basically not just Edward leaves, the whole Cullen family leaves, which I did not remember. So here's my thought. Because I'm like, he actually doesn't have to convince them all to leave. He basically just has to convince Carlisle and Esme to leave, which I think he could do, you know?
What about Alice? That's what I keep coming back to.
Well, because Alice, I think Jasper legitimately chose for himself to go away, to go to Denali. And so then Alice follows Jasper to be with him, like, and support him. So I think they're already gone, actually.
But to not communicate with her at all, that's what because I get like her not being there, but like she is not communicating with them at all. That's what we can get more into that when we get into it. But
no, for sure. But my thought on this is like, it's not the family's decision. It's just Edward's decision to leave. And Edward pushes all of them, thinking Bella will come try to talk to the rest of the family or see him there or something like that, you know? Yeah. And so then, like, Emmett and Rosalie are off in Africa. They go back. My assumption is that, like, Alice is with Jasper. And then, maybe has talked to the family and decided she's going with Jasper. And then Edward just convinces
Carlisle.
Carlisle and Esme.
Yeah.
To leave with him for Bella.
I get that.
That's my assumption at this point. Anyways, but not at this point because we're not there yet.
Yeah. Sorry, I kind of jumped ahead for us, but
that's okay. We nearly are. What else do you have notes on for chapter 2? I guess this is where we would talk about Carlisle stitching up Bella's arm.
Yeah, I had notes here about them talking about Edward's beliefs around what happens to your soul and stuff, and I was just kind of bothered we didn't get any insight to this in Midnight Sun. I feel like it was extremely relevant to what was happening in Midnight Sun, and it would have been interesting to hear about from Edward's perspective. But
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have had a couple moments already that I'm regretting we don't have an Edward POV, because I keep being like, oh, we'll find out about that. Nope, just kidding. We won't. It's not an upcoming chapter.
Yeah, I had a note of that right here where Carlisle is talking about what happened when he turned Edward, and like his mother seems to possibly know that there's something up with him about like him potentially being a vampire or something. I'm like, I want to have an answer to this, but I don't think we'll ever get one.
Yeah. And maybe we
would get that answer from Edward, but
yeah, I don't know that we would, to be honest. But yeah, I do think that was super interesting. Yeah, Carlisle's section was, to me, the most intriguing in the whole section, and one of the few times I wasn't just like either heartbroken or pissed at Edward. Yeah, because I think it's super interesting that, so we find out that Carlisle believes in heaven and hell, and basically he has like what I would say a typical, maybe a lot of religions, but specifically based on Stephenie Meyer's belief system, I'm led to believe, and Carlisle's like dad's belief system, it sounds like he has a typical Christian belief still, even though he's a vampire. And that is part of why he has chosen to be a vampire vegetarian and like things like that, you know. I also, in this section, to go along with that, I loved where Bella's asking him about becoming a surgeon, and he says that using his heightened senses to be able to save someone that other doctors couldn't save makes him feel like he is like tilting the scales, like he's using this for good. He's like balancing out, which one tells me Carlisle also thinks being a vampire is inherently bad or evil. And he's trying to like earn this. And two, also like, well, I guess I just kind of said it, but yeah, that he like feels this like indebtedness, or like he feels like it's his responsibility to like go in and help save these people, because then he's like, right, you know, like the balance is more equal. Super interesting. Super interesting. Yeah. Yeah, and then we find out that Edward believes there's God and heaven and hell, but he doesn't think it applies to vampires. And that everyone else in the family doesn't believe in any of that, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting that they all have such different concepts of what happens, and and that Edward like seems so sure of it that he's like putting all of this into it, and it's interesting that he's the only one who has that belief and is yeah.
Yeah, which is, I mean, we could debate about it more, but it also is a little like nonsense because it's a fantasy world. But the idea of like being immortal and having like your soul go to like a heaven or hell is really like complicated, but it's kind of an interesting idea also. Like if you finally do end your immortality on your on your own, like then your soul goes on. It's really interesting.
I actually had done some research on this topic, which sounds insane.
It does. Tell me more.
It does sound insane. It wasn't in regards to this book even, which makes it sound even more crazy, but about elves, because I was going to potentially be writing about elves and was looking into different lore that there is and whatnot. And elves, you know, are immortal and have different things, and like I don't know if I want to speak on the Lord of the Rings mythology because I don't know it that well, but I'll just say that they had some interesting concepts to
yes.
what happens after
they go to like the immortal realm on the ship, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, wow, guys, again, another one for the YouTube. Can you see? I don't know if you can even see.
Oh, I saw it for a second there. There we go. Kind of.
Can we? No.
It was close, yeah. Yeah. Can see it.
Anyways, it's the Witch King being slain, and it says girl power. So funny. Anyways, all right. Lord of the Ring reference for you. Too much time was just spent on my lock screen nonetheless. Yeah, so I thought this chapter, despite being in kind of the midst of like really the catalyst of Edward going into a deep gloom depression, Bella going into depression, it actually was very, very interesting. I wish we had more of the lore, less of the depression. But
I did have a note at the end of this chapter when they're saying goodbye, and it's like very clearly getting the vibe that something weird is going on, and I'm like, oh my god, does he leave now? Because I couldn't remember when he leaves, and I'm like, he probably just wanted to have her like have a memorable or happy birthday. Like I feel like if we got his context, that would be his reasoning, just like he did with prom. And I was like, what a douchebag.
Literally. He sucks in this. He sucks in this. It's just, no, here's why I'm so mad. If you don't get why I'm so mad, I'm really happy for you, because that means you maybe have not had a man do this to you in your life. But like, no, just this idea of like, I know better than you and I'm ending it and it's for your own good. And to be on this like moral high ground and feel so morally elitist while overtly ignoring what the other person is directly communicating, and you choose to not directly communicate and like hold all this knowledge to yourself and believe the other person is wrong, it makes me so mad, guys. It makes me so mad. And I hate that. I hate that in life, not even as a trope. And then we already know I hate a miscommunication trope. The second trope I hate the most is a love triangle.
Ah, like Twilight.
New moon will be the death of me.
Yeah. I did think it was interesting how Jake mentioned about the power dynamic, and I'm like, yep, that's very accurate and ties into this whole thing.
So true. And I've been thinking about the power dynamics in relationships a lot recently, specifically around Erica Jane and Tom Girardi from The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. If you know, you know. But you should know. Anyways, but just this idea of like older men with a lot of money being into younger women who are broke. You know, and you hear about it a lot, even within the Housewives franchise, of like men who are already super rich getting their second or third wives who they met and they were a cocktail waitress at a bar. Like that is literally the story of like multiple, just in the Real Housewives, much less like real life, you know?
Or I just thought of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Have you watched all of that yet?
Yeah.
With Jen Affleck and
yes.
Her. Yeah.
That's what I was literally going to bring up next. Or you have this like a lot of different religions where the power dynamic is so off because there's this view that like men are correct and have ultimate authority, right? And like we're not trying to get into all that. And if you are somebody who believes that in your religion, like I'm not trying to come at you, but I do think overtly everyone can agree that like, yeah, that is a power dynamic. Like you have an imbalance of power in a relationship, which is just, it's scary. That freaks me out. Ugh. Yeah. And I think
turn her into a vampire already. Come on.
Yeah.
Not to make light of that whole situation, because obviously that is a serious situation, which I realized I did just make light of. But
yeah. We're not trying to make light of anyone's experience. And we're talking about Twilight. Yeah. Okay. I did not feel, obviously there was a huge power imbalance before, but to me, because Edward was obsessed with her, like he would be just as devastated if like Bella chose to leave him, and you really get that in Midnight Sun. So it doesn't feel like such a cringy power dynamic until now, where he's decided to just be detached. So for everyone who's like, Callie, you had 0 red flags about him this whole time and now you're all pissed. Yeah. And I stand by it.
And I think she should have noticed the red flags earlier, so.
No, there weren't red flags earlier. There weren't red flags to notice earlier. It was fine, and now it's not. I'm standing by it. All right.
You do that. Okay.
Yeah. Have we covered?
Once again, this is where you want to be watching this, because my facial expressions were saying a lot while I was not, so.
Yeah. I think they've picked up on it, Amy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now that we've thoroughly talked about some of the relationship dynamics going on in chapter 3, we really just like segued in. But let's talk about, Edward goes into the woods to actually end it with her. I can't even talk about what he says because he's just the worst. Okay. But then we have some interesting things happen here. Beyond one, Bella definitely is in shock, having a panic attack, trying to follow him. It's super bad, super like heart-wrenching. And then we get the first more overt hint that the werewolves are like full werewolves.
Yeah. I was curious to see if Jake was going to say anything about that, but I didn't want to ask any questions because then it'd be too obvious. So
yeah, totally. Yeah. Tell me some of your thoughts, if you have any, around, we know there's large animals in the woods. And then Seth, who you may remember, is one of Sam. Okay. Just kidding.
There is a Seth later on, but
yeah.
I think,
yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Sam maybe is one of Stephenie Meyer's brothers, but then Seth is her son. Also, if you read the dedication to this book, it was dedicated to her dad, who was Stephen Morgan, maybe was his name. Anyways, so I thought that was also very, like, just close to Stephenie Meyer. Anyways. Interesting.
Well, I'm not going to say what I think about it. I want to hear what you think about it, because I might remember more than you or not. So what are your thoughts?
I don't remember anything about Sam. Sam I am. Yeah. Mostly just they're in the woods. We know from Charlie having a conversation with Billy later that basically, like, Charlie freaks out that Bella isn't there. And then, like, presumably calls people to try to find Bella, somehow tells Billy, and Billy says, oh, like, let the kids from the res, like, go, because they know the woods way better. And then they find them. But I don't have, honestly, a ton of thoughts beyond what's, like, in the book.
Okay. Did you, I'm curious, have any thoughts about when it was, like, Charlie got that call about, like, the fires going on and, like, that whole thing?
Yeah. I mean, I was like, okay, my first thought was, I was like, are the werewolves burning down the Cullens' house? That was my first thought.
That's your just because I remember I had a very specific first thought when I read this the first time, and Jake didn't mention it. And based on what you just said, I don't think you're going to say what I thought happened. But did you have any thoughts? Okay, I could. Yeah, I mean, you already know, like, what does or doesn't happen in regards to this. But I 100% thought that they were killing some of the Cullens and burning their bodies.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And I don't know if that's, like, an intentional thing that they were, because it says, like, that they weren't on the res where they were burning the fires or something.
No.
So
no, they weren't.
Yeah, that's what I remember that I had thought that. Obviously, I don't think that now, but
yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was not my takeaway, and it makes sense. Jake wouldn't have noted that because he doesn't know the whole vampires can only be killed. And
that's what I thought. That is why I asked him, though, why he thought happened to the Cullens or where they were at now, because I was curious.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I thought they were burning down their house, but I thought the Cullens could outrun them. But maybe not. I don't know. Maybe just Edward could. He's the only one who's that fast.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And at the end of this chapter is where I got really pissed off at Edward, because Bella rushes up to her room and realizes he took the CD and the pictures of him. Like, it is like, I mean, all of what he's doing is bad, but, like, to just take those things from her is just horrible. Like, horrible.
Yeah.
I got so mad.
No, it's like the king of gaslighting here, because for real, like, to be like, well, I'm just going to erase this memory of you. We'll talk about that more, because obviously Bella, like, has some realizations around this in chapter 5, maybe. But yeah, absolutely, like, so terrible. Also, I mean, like, that's part of the grieving process of, like, when you're finally ready to, like, get rid of the stuff that was your ex's, you know? So it also is just, like, not helpful overtly in multiple ways, you know?
Yeah, it really pissed me off.
Yeah. Especially, like, the song, like, it's so dumb, and you just gave it to her.
And, like, he knew that, like, he was gonna leave eventually, so why even give that to her?
Yes.
Like,
give her something expensive that she could have returned, or invest stock money in her college fund or something. Come on. Like, if you're just whatever, it's dumb. Okay. The song was such a sweet gift, but like to then just take it is nonsense.
Yeah.
Ugh. Okay. Well, the next thing I want to mention is the transition of the months in the book specifically. I think this is so well done. Like, I think this is brilliant. You end chapter 3, you turn the page to go to chapter 4, and it just says October. And then, so you think, okay, we've skipped into October. Great. Which also I'm like, do me and Bella have the same birthday too? Are we both September birthdays?
Well, they said her birthday. It's September 13th. So you guys are
1 day off.
Or 1 day. Yeah, sorry, I said the wrong day.
Wow. That's so cute for us.
Yeah.
We are so similar, which I don't love. She's not my favorite protagonist.
I feel like you're alike in her good qualities.
And her drama.
I mean, yeah, but not as bad as her. You're dramatic in a different way.
I'm not as
in a better way.
Hoping, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Whoopsies. Anyways, yeah.
What is that? Libras?
Virgos.
Okay.
Virgos. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep. Yeah. So anyways, you flip the page, it says October, you think chapter 4 is going to start. You flip the page, November, December, January. But I just loved that each page was just the month title and then you flip it. Like, it was such a beautiful way to say without saying, like, nothing happened. Like, Bella's life was blank. Her mind was blank. She was like that numb that there's like nothing there. I just thought this was like actually pretty powerful, like for you to really get in the feeling of how stuck she's been without us having to like sit in that. The movie scene also does this really well.
I was about to say, I think that was one thing that they translated really well to the movie, because it's one single shot just spinning around her as she looks out a window and the change. And that's why I remembered like when Edward broke up with her, was because I remembered that moment where they're so I think this is one of the better, definitely from this movie, from what I remember, one of the better like adaptation moments that they did really well. Yeah And the music is iconic also. Yeah
It is. Oh man. Okay, well,
I also did have a note. Well, I guess it's coming up in chapter 4 here.
Yeah, but, great. Yeah. Jump in. Chapter 4. Bella's not doing well.
And Charlie is not happy about it.
No, he is very concerned.
Like, I am sending you home, which I had notes about that. The fact that he said sending her home when... Yeah. And she specifically earlier referred to it as Charlie's house and not her house. But then also, he's talking about sending her home to Jacksonville, which she has literally never lived to, possibly even been to.
Yeah.
Which is just very sad. And I had notes about Charlie and how he said about her, it wasn't that she wasn't doing any, or well, no, he says he didn't do anything, but then it also goes into about that he doesn't want her to try to do anymore because it's so clear that she's trying but not doing anything. Not getting better. And I really I liked it better in the book that he points that out rather than in the movie. It's like he just accepts like her trying harder by like going to the movies with her or whatever, and like, oh, going on a girls trip, yeah, that sounds good. I feel like this shows that he's more insightful about what's going on more, which makes sense since he also like had someone leave him unexpectedly in Forks, but he obviously. But it's really sad about sending her home though. That just
I know that part is sad. I do think I also had notes on this, and I think it's actually really important because throughout the whole series we see Charlie being pretty like not in tune with Bella's emotions, pretty unaware, pretty checked out. And this is the first time that he's getting it right. Like, her internal world is correct. And I think that line is so important. Like, that he's like, I don't want you to have to try harder. You're already trying so hard. It's just not working. Because that shows, like, he gets it. Like, this is the first time he is correct about the internal dialogue and the emotional experience she's having. You know, he's been like wrong basically in almost every other case, like legitimately. And this is the first time he's right. And it is because it's so similar. You know, he was super young when they got married, super young when Renee left. And we do know, like we talked about, you know, the foreshadowing that happened at the end of the last book, that was like Bella's mom being super worried because she thinks Bella takes after Charlie like this, and that Edward leaving her was going to kind of wreck Bella. And so we see that Charlie, like, he does know what this feels like in some ways, and he's now panicking about it even more, you know? Yeah. Ugh. So sad.
Also, she has a note like about how she thought she had been fooling him the whole time about her like trying, and that he clearly saw through it, which I was a little like bothered by the way that Charlie just all of a sudden is like, that's it, I'm sending you home. I'm like, it's probably not a great way to start a conversation with someone who's clearly going through it as a teenager. And I was like, but there's probably conversations leading up to this point. But then she says she thought she had been fooling him, and I'm like, nope, there was not conversations leading. Doesn't sound like so.
Yeah,
it could have been handled better, but you know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like felt like I can like physically feel it in my body, like the depression and just her being like so stuck. Like, this was a rough one. This was rough to read. It was rough. My next notes pick up in Port Angels.
I think it's Angeles, like Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong.
Great. That makes more sense.
Yeah. It's till then either. So.
All right. Which is eek. We see creepy guy again.
I had a note just before that about how they're walking to the bright golden arches of the McDonald's. And I was like, once again, weird product placement vibes, but
so yes,
then the creepy man.
Oh my gosh.
I don't think it was the same creepy person, was it? It just reminded her of.
Oh, I thought it was the same guys. Like the same. I thought it was literally the same group of guys, not the one guy because they sent him to jail, you know?
Oh.
But I thought it was like the other guys that were with him.
I could definitely be wrong.
I mean, either of us could. It doesn't really matter. The point is still like, obviously I did think that. So then I was really like, this is like freaky that she's like drawn into this. But where then I'm like, okay, I don't know. Like, maybe it makes sense that she's pushing. Obviously, it's still like so dumb of her, but like, then because then she hears Edward's voice, and she can't decide if it's in her head or if it's real. Well, she doesn't even think one of the options for her is not that it's actually Edward. Yeah. Her options are
first option is she's crazy.
Yeah, she's crazy. Yeah. Or two, that like this is her brain safety mechanism putting Edward's voice in her head. I was like, wait, is it Edward? Like I was like phantom. I don't think that's true, but for a minute I was like trying to remember if that checks.
Yeah, I also couldn't remember exactly because like in the movies they portray it as where you actually like see Edward. And I couldn't remember what happened either, but
yeah,
pretty sure it's just her head.
Yeah. But I'm also like, it would make sense. Like it would like check for Edward to be like following her, you know, and like say something.
Yeah, that would.
He's like running up close enough.
Yeah, it was Port Angeles the last time we discovered that he was following her, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, hand gestures. I feel
I know. Really
that.
incredible.
Should make it 3D production and have you reaching out into the audience.
Yeah. That was Edward running up to whisper it and then running back before she could see. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So anyways, don't remember that, but we will find out maybe, but not right away because we're not getting an Edward POV. Yeah. But this is the start of the risk taking and Bella kind of like seeking out some adrenaline, which we get more into in chapter 5. But what else do you have for chapter 4, Amy?
Or do you don't have anything else?
Chapter 5 it is. All right. Okay, my first note is kind of along these lines, which Bella starts realizing that Edward didn't keep his promise to her, so why is she so worried about keeping her promise to him? I also think just generally it's fair, like, to be like, why am I keeping my promise to this, like, guy? And I think it's pretty dumb of Edward to think making her promise to stay out of trouble would not incentivize her to, like, be riskier because, again, maybe this is just me, but it absolutely would. Like, I'm mad at you and you are like, be safe, don't do anything crazy. And now I'm like resentful and you've just left and not communicated anything. Absolutely, I'm going to go out and be more risky just to spite you.
Yep.
I almost started just like swearing and yelling at Edward there. Ugh, mad.
Agree. For sure.
Yeah. So, yeah. And Bella going through like Edward's promise, like, you know, so she justifies it that Edward, you know, made her a promise in exchange for that, which is that she was never gonna see him again, and he was gonna totally remove himself from her life. Like he wasn't even there, is what it says. And that maybe he stole all this stuff from her, but like he can't just like erase the time they spent together. And she starts getting mad at Edward kind of for the first time, which is so fair. So fair. I'm so glad she gets to that point.
She should be mad. That she should.
Yeah, she should. She should.
I did have some notes before it got to that point because the chapter opens up with her working at an retailer. Where Mike Newton's parents own it, I think, right? It's called like Newton's, and Mike also works there, which also just insane that she works at that place because
so funny.
But and then the customers are talking about seeing grizzlies close up in Yellowstone, but it was nothing compared to what they had just seen in the mountains, which I'm pretty sure is once again alluding to werewolves, which is just a little note that there are people seeing them. And I also no, never mind. I was going to say that it might be describing Jacob specifically, but it's not because I remember his coloring is not the same. That's insane that I remember what color Jacob's werewolf is.
Yeah, but they specifically talk about like big black creatures.
I do think I know who it is, but I'm not going to say it. So,
Right.
Not Jacob though, but
Yeah, which to me alludes to one, I think this is really interesting where we see the Cullens have been like hyper conscious of like how they present and show up to seem normal and all these things. And that the werewolves are not so concerned, you know, and whether that's because they're super, you know, super young, just all of a sudden got all these powers, so they're just like running all over the place is kind of my assumption. But yeah, we definitely get a sense they are not so careful, not being like watched by older werewolves who can put them in line, because obviously we know there haven't been werewolves previously. So yeah, I think that's a good note. Glad you brought it up.
And I also think at this point, because then we get to her going to Jacob later, but it seems like Jacob's still not a werewolf, but I could be wrong. We can get there.
He's definitely transitioning if he's not all the way, because we know now he's 6'2". I think, does he get up to 7 feet, or is that just the arbitrary hot guy fantasy height? And that's why I think.
I don't think he gets to 7 feet. No.
Okay, I swore it was like insanely tall.
I think so. I think it said he was like 6'6" or 6'4". It was pretty tall.
Or maybe 6'4". He's already at 6'4".
I think it might have been. I don't know. I didn't take note of it. I think it was. I'll scan through, but
yeah. Anyways, yeah, he's tall. That's the point. He's once again tall, and
6'5". Found it.
Oh, he's 6'5" already?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, I just found it too. 6'5". Yeah.
It does say that he specifically says something about how he's still a beanpole, though. I'm like, I feel like he's not yet.
Yeah.
Aware that he's like a werewolf, but
yeah. Yeah, but we obviously know like his sense of smell specifically against the vampires we know is happening. We know that he is tall. So yeah. Okay. Then let me pull back up my notes here.
Yeah, we kind of skipped over that Bella picks up some motorcycles. I don't know if you have any for that.
Yeah, I do. That's where my notes pick up after her realizing the like basically that Edward is gaslighting her. Then I do think it's accurate, having lived in a small town in high school. There's not a lot of ways to be reckless. It's basically like substance abuse of some kind or something fast.
Yeah.
You know, like
Stephenie Meyer's Mormon, we're not doing drinking, so.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I was like, this checks. Like if you're not into, like drinking or doing drugs and you're trying to be rebellious in a small town, you're racing cars or dirt bikes or, bull riding or whatever, something adrenaline pumping country stuff,
Yeah.
Anyways, so I was like, this checks with small town life.
Yeah. And it was interesting how she brought up about how her dad, Charlie, is so against motorcycles because of his experience being a cop in traffic accidents and whatnot. And she kind of is like, whatever, I'll rebel against him too.
Yeah. Yep. That does also, I'm like, I feel like every like nurse and like police officer I know hate motorcycles. Yeah. Okay, my next notes are around the end of the chapter here. I don't know if you have anything before or with the interaction with Billy or anything like that.
I didn't have anything with the interaction with Billy. I just had some random notes with Jacob and about how much I love him. And that when he came up and like said Bella and his excited grin, even though it's not in the book, all I could think was, where the hell have you been, Loca? So I just thought that was
iconic.
Yeah. And then the only other real note that I have is about when they are chatting and she says that what is the context of it? I don't know. She says something about sounds like a date and his eyes sparkled at the word, and she said that she needed to rein in her enthusiasm before giving him the wrong idea, and I was just like, it's too late for that. He's already there.
Yeah, I thought it was so funny that she's like, of course, like, who would agree to this plan? I'm going to fix up motorcycles, go against, like, my dad to do it, and use my college money to pay for it. And that, like, only a teenage boy could be convinced that this is a solid life choice. Yeah. And that she's, like, so thankful for that. I thought was so funny.
Yeah. I also thought it was really nice that, like, at the beginning of their interaction, she's like, oh, I forgot how much I really like Jacob. And I was like, that's nice. I'm glad that that she, like, still cares about there, because, like, her friends at school, It's not great. So
no, I do feel like him and Alice are kind of her only like genuine friends. You know, like her friends
with her, which kind of ruins it a little bit. So.
Yeah, it does, which bumps me out a little. I guess Angela's like a good friend to her, but they're not close. Yeah. Anyways, man, and that's the end for me. Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I was just looking. I also took some notes on the movie, but I think we kind of talked about the stuff. Oh, the only thing that we didn't talk about too much was that, well, we briefly did, but I like in the movies that they don't completely ignore the idea of Victoria. Like they talk about her, because that is still a loose end. And if I think maybe when I did read this book, because I hadn't seen New Moon because it hadn't come out yet, and I was just like, what about her? Like, we don't know anything about that. Like, so. And I feel like turn. So I did think that the movie addressed that, but
no, me too, because it is such. We even talked about it, on our last episode, like total loose end, left that completely open.
Yeah. So yeah, that's I think all that I had that we didn't already touch on. So
yeah. Man. Well, we're back at it, guys. We will continue to be releasing on Twilight Tuesdays, even though we're reading New Moon. And consensus is still we will be planning on doing weekly episodes. So once again, please share with us, send us any thoughts that you have. We're so thankful for you guys listening and joining in for the start of season 2.
Yay! Thanks, everybody.
Woohoo! Bye.